Welcome to Knowledge Catalog, and in this video we are going to try and see what is the difference between classical and operant conditioning. One thing is for sure, these two theories support James B. Watson's idea of education, which is behaviorism, in which the ultimate goal of education is the acquisition of new behavior regardless of the processes that are happening in the mind, because those are the major concerns of cognitivists, not behaviorists. So it is achieved, the new behaviors or acquisition of new behaviors or new behavior is achieved through the following theories: classical and operant conditioning. For the first one, classical conditioning, it is the main proponent is Ivan Pavlov. Dogs naturally salivate, which is an unconditioned or natural response at the sight of food, when presented, of course, with food. So, naturally, dogs are going to salivate with food. This makes presenting food as an unconditioned stimulus because it is, again, a natural stimulus. Take note that any unconditioned thing or unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response are taken to be natural. So the unconditioned stimulus or natural stimulus of presenting food will produce an unconditioned response, which is salivating among dogs. This makes presenting food that one. Okay, so because it is a natural stimulus, dogs fed by people wearing white laboratory coats, which is now a neutral stimulus, because it can't by itself produce the unconditioned response, which is salivation, are actually salivating because they associated white laboratory coats with the possibility of food nearby, even when there isn't any food inside. So, the point of that first paragraph is this. Instead of the unconditioned stimulus, which is presenting food, being the sole factor or sole reason for dogs to produce an unconditioned response, which is salivating, the frequency of wearing a lab coat, of people wearing white lab coats and feeding the dogs, made the dogs associated white lab coats with food, making lab coats a neutral stimulus. So I hope you get that. So we have there now, we are presented now two kinds of stimulus in there. We have an unconditioned stimulus, which will actually produce the unconditioned response, and a neutral stimulus, which by itself cannot really produce the unconditioned response, but it does in the case of dogs. Ivan Pavlov now thought of adding a new thing, a new stimulus, teach the dogs something new by producing a conditioned stimulus. Okay, so he is going to teach the dog a new thing, which is a new stimulus, and teach the dog to associate it with the unconditioned response by conditioning the dogs. So yeah, let's just read it. Classical conditioning is when you associate the ring of a bell with food, constantly ringing it before you give dogs their food. If you purposefully condition dogs that way, that is going to teach them that the ring of a bell means presence of food, and this will turn unconditioned response of salivating into a conditioned response, because the conditioned response is something you taught them. It is something that you yourself purposefully put in the equation. Okay, the dogs did not learn that by themselves. It is not unconditioned, it is not neutral, it is a conditioned response. It is done by a teacher. In education, in actual education, in our actual classroom setups, the neutral stimulus may actually come in the form of prior knowledge. Okay, yung mga estudyante, they have prior knowledge. These are the things that without you, the teacher, teaching them, they just know this is associated to something like this. Okay, so those are neutral stimuli. If you, the teacher now, is going to take the responsibility of educating these kids, then you are deliberately giving them conditioned stimulus, asking them deliberately making them respond in a particular way, or siguro in the same manner, but with a different stimulus now. So to sum it up, in classical conditioning, we have the following factors: a stimulus and a response. That is the summary of classical conditioning. And yes, there's a new kind of behavior that's going to be observed. The next one, it may seem simpler actually, pero it's more complicated. Operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner is the major proponent, but his work is based on Edward Lee Thorndike's law of effect. Operant conditioning, it is when a behavior that is followed by a reward is likely to be repeated. A behavior followed by a punishment will weaken and die out. Unlike classical conditioning, in which we are going to associate the stimulus with a response, in operant conditioning, we are going to put the subject or the student under a situation in which the student is going to make an action or do something, okay, make an action, and we are going to give the student a reinforcement. So we are going to discuss the types of reinforcements that are present. So because they are like positive, they are going to make operant conditioning quite different, actually different from classical conditioning. So the following are they. Positive reinforcements are basically rewards, whereas negative reinforcements can teach escape learning or avoidance learning. And then there is punishment. So let us present the following as an example. Inside the box is a rat, okay, and then the thing that the thing where the rat is standing on is an iron grid. It's made of iron. It can conduct electricity, and yes, it is connected to a source of shock, electrical shock. So yeah, it's there. Now there is a lever inside the box in which the rat, rat is like it can pull it down or pull it upwards. And then there's light. There is this bulb above that lever. So inside the box, the floor is made of iron grids. There is a lever. The rat can manipulate it. And then there's light above it. Now, how is operant conditioning going to be illustrated in that situation? So we have the following. A positive reinforcement looks like this. The rat is going to be put inside the box. Of course, it doesn't have an idea, like it's rat, and it's just going to walk around inside the box, and it's just going to basically be ratish. And then with that movement, it's going to pull the lever, move the lever up or down. And then next to that lever is a hole, and then that hole is going to be filled with food pellets if the rat is going to hit the lever. Am I making sense? I hope so. So once the rat notices that there is food right there in that hole, and notices that it is happening because the rat pulled the lever, then the rat is going to deliberately learn actually, that by pulling that lever, there is food. Okay, so by doing that action, there is a reward. That is a positive reinforcement. Again, positive reinforcement is basically a reward for doing something. The rat, being the student, must do something, must learn to do something, well, ideally by itself, okay, and see the reward by itself as well. Okay, so that is going to change its behavior, because in the experiment, from just being from pointlessly moving around inside the box, the rat now learned that by pulling the lever, it is going to get some food. Now remove the rat because it already learned something, and then put a new rat inside and subject it under a different condition, because we are going to illustrate negative reinforcement. So negative reinforcement is still good actually. It's still good for the subject, for the rat, but it takes a different form. Say, upon putting the new rat inside the box, it is being subjected to an immediate electrical shock. Okay, well, it's not too much shock naman to kill it immediately. But it is the kind of shock that will disturb the rat and will make it go around quite fast inside the box just to escape that. Of course, it's hurting it. Okay, it's hurting it. That shock is hurting it. So what it's going to do, it's going to panic inside, and if it is going to by any chance hit that lever now is going to stop the electric shock. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Um, the rat, upon being put inside, is subjected to electrical shocks, making it move about, panicking, and once it hits that lever, the shock is going to be removed. Okay, so at first try, perhaps the rat is not going to make sense of that, but next time you're going to just randomly put another shock. Okay, you're just going to turn on the shock again, and then the rat's going to panic again, and if it hits the lever again, well, perhaps this time it noticed that it hit the lever and then the shock stopped. Well, in the experiment, every time there's a shock, the rat's just going to pull the lever, and then the unpleasant experience is going to be removed. So a student, once it's put under a negative experience, say the tension, they are actually expected to do something to make up for that. I mean, say actually it may look like a punishment, but if you're now teaching, if you really want to teach the child, then if it's put under a negative condition, and then the student is going to do something to for him to be removed from that negative condition, then that is negative reinforcement. You are giving the child an out, okay, a way out of of a negative experience of a negative situation. So it's good for the child because it learns how to do. He learns what to do in order to escape that particular situation. That kind anyway of negative reinforcement is what we call as escape learning, because you are teaching the child a way out of a negative situation. Now, what is avoidance learning? Avoidance learning is, okay, a new rat. Okay, let's put a new rat inside the inside the box. Yeah. Okay, so I'm quite lost in that. You put a new rat inside the box, and then you subject it to shocks. But this time, okay, this time you put a shock, and then it's going to panic, and it will be hitting the lever, and then the shock is going to stop. And then you randomly put the shock back on, and then it's going to panic. The rat is going to panic, and then it will hit the lever, and the shock's going out. The whole time, what you're doing is this. Before you put a shock, the next time, before you put a shock, that light bulb next to the lever is going to light up, like say red. Okay, if it's red, and then if it's red, there's going to be this shock that is going to follow, and then the rat is going to just panic inside, and then hitting the lever, the shock will stop, and then there's going to be another red light, and then the rat will then learn soon enough, deliberately actually, that when there's red light, a shock is going to follow, and thus, to avoid that, the rat must pull the lever. Okay, I hope you took note of that. To avoid that negative experience, the rat must pull the lever. Okay, so it is still negative reinforcement because there is this threat of a punishment, but this time you are giving the student a way of avoiding that negative punishment. Okay, you're giving the rat a clue that a punishment or a negative experience is imminent, and you're giving the rat this idea that it can avoid it by giving it that clue. Okay, so to sum it up, for the reinforcements, we have three kinds. A positive reinforcement is basically a reward. Okay, do good, you get a reward. A negative reinforcement, it has two types. First is it is escape negative reinforcement, you are giving the child, the student is already subjected to a negative experience, and you are giving that student this way out. Okay, perhaps you're teaching the student a new kind of behavior kasi, so you are going to give the student a way out to escape that negative experience it is already experiencing. And if you are going to give the student a chance to avoid a negative experience, then that is avoidance learning. Also, then, and it's a next type of negative reinforcement. Now, what is a punishment? A punishment by itself is just a punishment, in a negative thing, experience, that is given to a student, that is given to the rat because it did something. Say inside the rat, inside the say box, you put a new rat, and because the rat is moving around too much. That new rat is so malikot. It's moving around too much. It hit the lever and then it put it to it turned on the electric shock that lasted for 2 minutes. Okay, so that's a negative experience. And then perhaps at first the rat is not going to notice that, but next time after 2 minutes, okay, next time once the rat is going to go around, move around, and then it's going to hit the lever again, then there's another shock, and then with many repetitions, the rat is just going to notice that the shock is only coming because it is hitting the lever because ang likot niya, okay, it's moving around too much. So that is going to teach the rat now that that is a negative experience it can avoid just by avoiding hitting the lever. Okay, so it's much like hindi actually. So avoidance learning has a clue. Okay, avoidance learning has a clue, but learning about punishment must be done by the subject itself. So yeah, that is how they are different. Avoidance learning is a positive, is a negative reinforcement. It has a clue. You are giving this student a clue that it is about to have a negative experience. So the student must do everything in his power to avoid that. In punishments naman, it just came, okay? And it's a pattern. It's a simple pattern that if it's going to do bad or to do something, it's going to lead to a negative experience. Okay, that is a punishment. So I hope that you understand the difference between reinforcement and the punishment. So this is a knowledge catalog, and I hope that you learned something, okay, in this video. If you have some questions or some suggestions to make these kinds of videos better next time, then you may just leave a comment down below. Okay, so see ya in the next video, I guess.